Violet is the talented but brutalized enslaved cook who turns her culinary gift into a precise instrument of vengeance against the family that oppressed her. For years, her cooking brought the Bogard family fame and delight. But one Sunday supper, her masterpiece served them a final, terrible night. In the suffocating humidity of the summer of 1847, a shadow fell over the Garden District of New Orleans, a darkness from which one of its most prominent families would never emerge. In a single evening, within the opulent walls of their Greek Revival mansion, 13 members of the Bogard family died, one after another, their lives extinguished within hours. The official records, buried deep within the Louisiana State Archives, speak of a sudden, virulent fever, a convenient explanation hastily scribbled to close a terrifying chapter. But the margins of those records, and the private journals of those who were there, tell a story that polite society fought to bury. Dr. Armand Tibido, the attending physician, confessed in his personal writings that he had never witnessed such synchronized, unspeakable agony. The symptoms, he wrote, bore no resemblance to any known disease. The victims' fingernails had turned a horrifying, inky black, their tongues swelling to a grotesque purple, and their final, tortured screams echoed through the mansion's hallowed halls until the first light of dawn broke over the Mississippi. What makes this case even more chilling, what elevates it from tragedy to a perfectly executed nightmare, is that every single death occurred exactly 90 minutes after the family's traditional Sunday supper. And the only person left standing in that house of death, the only one to survive the night unscathed, was Violet, the head cook. For over a century and a half, this massacre has remained one of New Orleans' most carefully guarded secrets, a story hidden behind a wall of shame, fear, and a deliberate, suffocating silence. But tonight, we will break that silence. We will step back into that kitchen and uncover the truth of what really happened, and why an entire bloodline was wiped from the face of the earth in a single, terrible evening. Before we continue with the story of Violet and the Bogard massacre, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Stories like this one, the ones that expose the darkness lurking beneath the surface of American history, are exactly why we do what we do. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what state you're listening from. We love connecting with fellow mystery enthusiasts from across the country. The truth about that fatal Sunday supper didn't begin with a single meal. It began years before the first drop of poison touched an aristocratic lip, rooted in a cycle of cruelty so profound it would eventually, inevitably, demand its due. New Orleans in 1847 was a city of breathtaking and brutal contrasts. Magnificent mansions, their wrought iron balconies draped with Spanish moss like funeral shrouds, rose like monuments to unimaginable wealth. But the very foundations of that prosperity rested on the bedrock of human bondage. In the Garden District, sugar plantation owners and cotton merchants built their fortunes on the broken backs of enslaved labor. The Bogard mansion stood as one of the district's crown jewels, a 3-story masterpiece with towering Corinthian columns that seemed to scrape the oppressive Louisiana sky. Octave Bogard, at 43, had inherited the house, the family's vast sugar plantation, and a reputation for being what polite society called a strict disciplinarian. To the enslaved people who served him, he was known as something far more sinister. He commanded his household with the same iron fist he used to rule his fields. His wife, Celeste, a delicate woman from a prominent Creole family, had long ago learned to turn a blind eye to her husband's monstrous cruelties in exchange for the gilded cage of her social position. Their 4 children, Etienne, 19, Margot, 17, Philippe, 15, and little Amélie, just 8, had been raised to see the human beings around them as property, no different from the fine china or the silver candlesticks that adorned their dining room. The mansion housed not just the immediate family, but an entire ecosystem of privilege and power. Octave's younger brother, Auguste, and his wife, Lucille, lived there with their twin sons, Henri and Louis. Auguste managed the plantation's city business, while Lucille hosted elaborate salons, fancying herself a patron of the arts. Completing the household were Octave's elderly mother, Grandmere Bogard, who at 78 still wielded immense influence, and Celeste's sharp-tongued spinster sister, Tante Felicite, whose watchful eyes missed nothing. In this world of suffocating privilege lived 26 enslaved souls, each bearing the invisible scars of their bondage. But none bore heavier scars than Violet. Violet had been born in the mansion's slave quarters in 1823, the daughter of Essie, the previous head cook. When Essie died of exhaustion, a barely 14-year-old Violet was thrust into the inferno of the kitchen, forced to feed the very family that owned her body and soul. She possessed an almost supernatural skill. Her hands, moving with an innate grace, knew exactly how much spice to add, how long to let a roux darken to a perfect mahogany, which herbs would transform simple ingredients into culinary masterpieces that were the envy of New Orleans. But this talent came at a price that no one in the grand house could possibly comprehend. She worked 18-hour days, rising before dawn and collapsing long after midnight, her small, windowless room containing nothing but a straw mattress and a small wooden cross that had belonged to her mother. What made Violet's situation a unique form of torture was a cruel irony devised by Octave himself. As head cook, she was responsible for the family's reputation for hosting the finest dinners in the district, yet she was forbidden from ever tasting the food she prepared. She knew the texture of every sauce by sight, the doneness of every roast by the scent wafting from the oven, the sweetness of every dessert by intuition alone. Octave took a perverse, sadistic pleasure in this, often reminding her, "You create food fit for kings, but you, girl, will eat scraps for the rest of your life." The other enslaved people looked to Violet with a mixture of respect and pity. They respected her skill and the small privileges her position afforded. She was rarely whipped and never sent to the cane fields. But they pitied her profound isolation. Among the staff was Samuel, the stable-master's son, a strong, kind man of 28. Their stolen glances across the courtyard and whispered conversations in the dead of night had blossomed into a fragile, dangerous love. Samuel dreamed of buying their freedom, a dream as distant as the stars in a world where his master might profit $50 a year from his labor. There was also old Moses, the butler who had served the family for over 40 years, his bent back a testament to decades of servitude. His loyalty was legendary, but a closer look might reveal the cold fire that still burned in his ancient eyes. And there was young Lily, barely 16, a lady's maid whose beauty had not gone unnoticed by the men of the house, forcing her to move through the mansion like a ghost, praying to remain invisible. The family's Sunday supper was a sacred ritual. Every week at 6 p.m., the extended family would gather beneath a massive crystal chandelier imported from Paris. The table, set for 20 with the finest china and sterling silver, was the stage for a performance of harmonious prosperity. For Violet, it was the culmination of a week of grueling effort. But beneath the glittering surface, tensions were simmering. The spring of 1847 had been hard. A poor sugar crop had brought creditors to the door, and the financial pressure had made Octave's temper never pleasant, explosive, and unpredictable. The enslaved people learned to read the signs: a clenched jaw, a sharp tone, and most terrifying of all, the cold, calculating look in his eyes when he was planning a new cruelty. It was during this period of mounting tension that the catalyst for the tragedy arrived, on a sweltering Thursday afternoon when the Louisiana heat pressed down like a suffocating blanket. Violet was in the kitchen, meticulously arranging canapes, when she heard a sound that turned her blood to ice: Samuel's voice, raised in distress from the courtyard. She rushed to the window and saw a scene that would forever sever her from the woman she once was. Samuel was on his knees in the dust, his shirt torn and bloody. Octave stood over him, a thick leather whip in his hand, his face a mask of pure rage. "You dare look at my daughter with those eyes?" he screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "You forget your place, boy." Violet understood instantly. Margot, Octave's 17-year-old daughter, had been spending time in the stables, her cheeks flushing whenever Samuel was near. Violet had seen Samuel's discomfort, his careful attempts to avoid the girl. But in the twisted logic of plantation life, a slave's discomfort was interpreted as presumption, a crime punishable by unimaginable pain. "Please, Master Bogard," Samuel gasped. I would never." "Silence." The whip cracked again, a sound like a gunshot in the humid air, leaving another bloody stripe across Samuel's back. As Octave raised his arm for another blow, something inside Violet broke. She burst from the kitchen and threw herself between the whip and Samuel's bleeding body. "Please, Master Octave," she cried, her voice trembling. "He's done nothing wrong." He's a good man. The words died in her throat as Octave's furious gaze turned on her. His rage morphed into something far more dangerous, a cold, calculating fury. The other slaves in the courtyard melted back into the shadows. "So," Octave said, his voice a terrifying whisper, "the cook thinks she can tell me how to discipline my property." He stepped so close she could smell the brandy on his breath. "You think because you can cook a decent meal, you have the right to question my judgment?" Silence hung in the air, broken only by Samuel's ragged breaths. Violet knew she had crossed a line, but looking at Samuel's broken form, she no longer cared. "Samuel is a good man," she repeated, her voice stronger now. "He ain't done nothing to deserve this." Octave's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. "A good man? He's property, girl. My property. And so are you." He leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper. "But I think you've forgotten that. I think you've gotten ideas above your station." The punishment that followed was a masterpiece of psychological torture. Samuel was locked in the stables with no food or water. But for Violet, Octave devised something far more cruel. "From now on," he announced to the household, "Violet will prepare all meals as usual. But she will not eat until every member of this family has declared themselves satisfied. And I," he smirked, "am very difficult to satisfy." The next 3 days were a living nightmare. Violet cooked elaborate meals while subsisting on water and scraps snuck to her by old Moses or Lily. Her hands shook, her vision blurred, her legs trembled with weakness. But worse was Octave's psychological warfare. He found fault with every dish, describing its supposed flavors and textures in glorious detail while she stood in the corner, swaying from hunger, forced to watch them eat. On the second day, a desperate Samuel escaped, only to be caught and beaten so savagely that Dr. Tobido had to be called. As the doctor tended to Samuel, he noticed Violet hovering nearby, her face gaunt, her eyes burning with an intensity that unsettled him. "That girl," he told his wife later, "has the look of someone pushed past the breaking point. It's a dangerous look." On the third day, as Violet watched Octave savor her famous praline bread pudding, a cold, terrifying clarity settled over her. Something inside her died, and something else, harder, colder, and infinitely more patient, was born. She began to notice things. The tremor in Octave's hand that betrayed his financial fears, the way Celeste's eyes darted to the brandy, Philippe's lecherous glances at Lily. She saw the family not as oppressors, but as a puzzle to be solved, a problem requiring a final solution. That night, as she collapsed onto her straw mattress, she made a decision. She would continue to serve the Bogard family, but she would serve them one last meal, a meal they would remember for eternity. As July blazed into existence, Violet became a ghost of her former self. Outwardly, she was the perfect, broken servant. Her movements in the kitchen, once fluid and graceful, became mechanical and precise. The humming ceased, replaced by a chilling silence. Samuel, recovering in the quarters, saw the change and was terrified. "Violet," he whispered one night, "you're scaring me. What's going on in that head of yours?" She turned to him, her silhouette framed in the pale moonlight, and her voice was devoid of all warmth. "I'm going to take care of everything," she said. "You don't need to worry anymore." Her trips to the French market now included clandestine stops at the stalls of herb vendors and medicine women. She was a careful student, never asking direct questions, but learning. She learned which plants mimicked food poisoning, which mushrooms induced symptoms like a sudden fever, and which combinations would produce effects that would puzzle even the most experienced doctor. Her most valuable teacher was Mama Bridget, an ancient Creole woman rumored to have been born free in Haiti. Mama Bridget saw the desperation beneath Violet's questions and shared her dangerous knowledge. "This root here," she'd say, "good for stomach troubles in small amounts. Too much, it makes a person very sick, very quick." Violet absorbed it all, learning about timing, dosage, and the delicate art of poison. She began her experiments, adding infinitesimal amounts of herbs to different dishes, noting their subtle effects. August's mild indigestion, Philippe's slight nausea, these were all data points in her horrific research, all dismissed by the family as effects of the summer heat. Her focus became absolute, her isolation complete. Even Samuel couldn't reach her. "You're changing, Violet," he told her one night in the garden. "You're becoming someone I don't recognize." For a moment, her mask slipped, and he saw the raw pain beneath. "They took everything from me," she said, her voice a dead whisper. "My mama, my freedom, and then they took you. They beat you like an animal and made me watch. They starved me and made it entertainment." "That don't mean you got to become like them," he pleaded. A coldness that made Samuel's skin crawl crept back into her voice. "I'm not becoming like them. They destroy because they enjoy it. I'm going to destroy because it's necessary." In late September, Octave announced a grand Sunday supper to celebrate the successful sugar harvest, a feast to reassert his power and prestige. For Violet, it was the perfect moment. The stage was set. Her final visit to Mama Bridget was somber. "You sure about this path, child?" the old woman asked. "There ain't no turning back." Violet's gaze was unflinching. "I'm already too far down the road to turn back." Just when we thought we'd seen it all, the horror in the Bogard mansion intensifies. If this story is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit that like button to support our content, and don't forget to subscribe to never miss stories like this. Let's discover together what happens next. Sunday, October 3rd, 1847, dawned clear and cool. In the kitchen, Violet moved with the ritualistic precision of a high priestess preparing a sacrifice. The house buzzed with activity, but Violet insisted on handling the most crucial elements of the meal alone, guarding her sauces and seasonings with a terrifying jealousy. Guests began to arrive. Judges, bankers, the mayor himself. A veritable who's who of the society that had built its wealth on her suffering. As the house filled with laughter and conversation, Violet worked in the shadows, making her final, terrible additions. A pinch of this for Grandmere's soup, a dusting of that for Octave's favorite meat, each dose calculated with a pharmacist's precision, designed to work slowly, cumulatively, and in perfect, deadly harmony. At exactly 6 p.m., old Moses announced, "Supper is served." The procession into the dining room was a parade of the doomed. The candlelight shimmered on crystal and silver, the air thick with the aroma of Violet's cooking. She watched from the doorway as the first course, a delicate turtle soup, was met with rapturous praise. "A masterpiece," declared Judge Dufresne. Each compliment was a twist of the knife, a testament to the artistry she was now using as a weapon. With each course, the pompano, the squab, the succulent roasts, the festive atmosphere grew. But Violet, the silent observer, noticed the subtle signs no one else did. August's slightly diminished appetite, Celeste pressing a hand to her stomach, the faint flush on Philippe's face. Dr. Tabido, a man of keen observation, was the first to feel a professional unease. He noted Grandmere's difficulty swallowing and young Henry's unusual perspiration, but dismissed them as minor ailments in the festive heat. The final course was her piece de resistance, the famous praline bread pudding. It was a taste of heaven, infused with the essence of hell. A triumph that will be remembered for years to come. Octave toasted, raising his glass to his finest cook. He had no idea how prophetic those words would be. The end came suddenly. As the diners settled back, satisfied and content, Auguste Bogard stopped mid-sentence, his hand clawing at his throat, his face a mask of confusion and pain. Celeste's fan clattered to the floor as her hands began to tremble uncontrollably. "Something's wrong," Dr. Tabido said, rising from his chair as his own stomach lurched violently. In moments, the scene of opulent celebration devolved into a charnel house. One by one, they were overcome. Severe pain, nausea, a burning that spread like wildfire. Grandmere was the first to collapse, her chair crashing to the floor. Little Amelie began to cry for her mother, her small body convulsing. Mayor Chuteau, dignity forgotten, crawled across the floor, leaving a trail of vomit as his body fought a battle it had already lost. Dr. Tabido, fighting his own waves of agony, tried to help, but he was powerless against a poison so sophisticated, so perfectly designed. "Get help," he gasped to old Moses, who stood frozen in the doorway, a silent witness to the apocalypse. In the kitchen, Violet stood perfectly still, a statue amidst the symphony of death she had composed. Tears streamed down her face, not of regret, but of a terrible final release. Samuel found her there. "Violet," he whispered, his voice choked with grief. "What have you done?" She turned to him, and her voice was quiet, clear, and utterly devoid of doubt. "I served them exactly what they deserved," she said. "Nothing more, nothing less." By midnight, the Bogard mansion was silent. Dr. Tobido, his own survival a lifelong mystery, struggled to complete the death certificates, listing the cause as sudden fever, a lie to contain a truth too monstrous for New Orleans to face. He knew proving murder was impossible. Violet's method was too perfect, her knowledge too deep. The aftermath was swift. The plantation was seized and sold. The enslaved people, including old Moses and Lily, were scattered across Louisiana, their families torn apart. Samuel was sold to a plantation in Mississippi, where he died 2 years later, a man broken by a grief he could never speak of. And Violet? She vanished from the historical record. Some say she was sold into obscurity. Others claim she escaped to freedom in the north. But the most persistent legend, whispered in the hidden courtyards of the French Quarter for generations, is that she simply walked away into the shadows of the city she had conquered. They say she spent the rest of her days using her incredible gift to feed the poor and the forgotten, finding a strange and quiet redemption. Dr. Tobido's private journal, discovered a century later, reveals his odd understanding of her crime. "She was not a killer by nature," he wrote. "She was a woman driven to become something she had never wanted to be by circumstances that would have broken most people. If there is guilt to be assigned, it must be shared by all of us who tolerated the system that created such desperation." The mansion itself became a legend, haunted not by ghosts, but by the memory of justice, however terrible. It was finally demolished in 1894, but the land where it stood, now a small park, is still said to be a place of strange occurrences: the sudden scent of cooking, the fleeting image of a young woman in an antebellum dress. Violet's story is a chilling reminder that every system of oppression carries the seeds of its own violent destruction. The real ghost that haunted the Bogard mansion wasn't a spirit, but the collective guilt of a society that built its prosperity on a foundation of human suffering. In the end, Violet's vengeance was both completely understandable and utterly tragic. The corruption of a soul who had once found joy in creation, forced by an evil world to find her only remaining purpose in destruction. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed? Could such a carefully planned revenge really have been carried out with the precision Violet displayed? Or are there elements that seem too perfect to be entirely believable? Leave your comment below and share your thoughts about whether justice was served or whether Violet's actions went too far. If you enjoyed this tale and want more horror stories like this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who loves mysteries. The darkest chapters of American history often contain the most compelling human dramas, and we'll continue exploring them together.